Season. Shad White, State Auditor. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Morning, brother. How are you?
I'm good. I look at this and I think, okay, to pick your brain, you are scheduled perfect time for this. First of all, and we'll get to the auditor stuff. We've got plenty of time.
Sure.
Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ruling from the Colorado Supreme Court is just absurd on its face. Obviously, it was a 4-3 ruling, so it was close. The basis of their ruling, for people who haven't read any articles about it yet, so they're saying that the president can't be on the ballot because of the 14th Amendment, because the 14th Amendment bars anyone from being an officer, whatever that may mean, being an officer if they have engaged in insurrection or rebellion. And, of course, we all know why that amendment was put into place. It was in the wake of the Civil War, and so that's what was on people's mind when they put that amendment into place. It had nothing to do with what happened on January 6th. And if you go back and you look at what happened on January 6th, the president repeatedly made calls for people to be peaceful and that sort of thing. So
or go home.
And go home.
Here's a question I have, though. Is there required an adjudication process, a jury or otherwise? Did the justices of the state Supreme Court level just make that determination themselves?
Well, usually what happens in a case like this is the facts are all known. So you typically, in a case like this, you might not have a jury trial. What you would say is a judge at the lowest level would say, all right, well, everybody agrees on the facts. Everybody agrees what exactly happened here. And so then the parties will file motions and they'll say something like, well, if everybody agrees on the facts, this is really just a question of the interpretation of the amendment for the judge to decide. And so I think that's what happened here. I didn't follow it closely at the trial court level because, frankly, I thought that there's no way that they're going to kick Trump off the ballot. But here we are. So then the question gets escalated up to that state Supreme Court, and then the judges say, well, okay, it's up to us to determine what the language in the 14th Amendment means, and in our judgment, by a 4-3 ruling, we think that he can't be on the ballot. Of course, this is going to go to the United States Supreme Court now. I mean, they're not going to be able to allow each individual state to come up with its own interpretation of the 14th Amendment. This is the federal Constitution, so the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have to decide what happens here.
Aren't you a little bit blown away by the audacity of them to do this, though?
Sure.
Now, my understanding was it was a split decision, but most of them are Democrat appointees on the Supreme Court in Colorado?
That could be right. I actually don't know the makeup of that Supreme Court.
I don't either.
But it was a split decision.
That was even more. That's even crazier.
Well, look, even if they're not appointed, even if they claim to be nonpartisan, which every person on this planet has their views about the world, so nobody's really nonpartisan. Everybody's got opinions. Yeah. It doesn't matter to me at the end of the day. What matters is that you have a body of 7 people who have decided that somebody can't be on the ballot using a pretty extreme interpretation of the law. And that undermines our democracy. I mean, if this were happening on the other side, if you had some Republicans saying, well, so-and-so can't be on the ballot, I mean, there would be riots in the streets. I mean, it would be wild. And so now we have to confront this possibility that you have a very small number of people coming from a very small subset of society telling the rest of us that we're not allowed to vote for somebody. And that's not going to be able to stand.
This same movement could have happened. You tweaked my interest on that statement because the same movement could have happened if it were reversed on Barack Obama actually in the legitimacy of his birth certificate.
Well, let's say a Supreme Court has said, there's not enough proof, we're kicking him off the ballot. I mean, it would be insane. You would have people rioting.
But people would be outraged as racist and everything else. People would be rioting.
Yep.
What happens here, though? The Colorado decision removing Trump from the ballot is so absurd on this. I'm reading this tweet here, that justices stayed their own ruling until January 4th. If the appeals court and the Supreme Court, then the Secretary of State has to keep it on. Is that just legal minutia or what?
Yeah, I think that's just a legal maneuver that sometimes judges will do, stay the ruling. I'm not sure why exactly they did that other than to try to calm the waters because they knew that this would be a controversial decision. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have to decide this. Let's be real about it. There's no way you can have each individual state deciding on their own whether somebody can be on the ballot. We've got to have a decision from the highest court in the land about what the 14th Amendment means. And I'm much more optimistic about how they will rule, the U.S. Supreme Court will rule, than the Colorado Supreme Court.
But if they didn't, and it'd be all over. That's it.
Oh, it would. It would be a catastrophe for democracy in this country. That's what would happen.
Well, it would, because what goes around comes around, one way or the other, if you like it or not. And in my lifetime, I've seen that through administration through administration. So, who would want to run for president?
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say this as somebody whose name is on the ballot every 4 years already. It's hard running for office. It really is. I mean, you have to confront the idea that you're going to have people come up to you at Kroger and tell you what they think about you. You know, when you're with your family. This is part of running for office, and I was willing to do that because I thought that I could make a difference, and I thought that I was prepared to do the job that I was signing up for, and that we would make some headway and make Mississippi better. But if I know also that I'm going to be subject to the whims of judges who will make extreme rulings, and I don't think that will happen here in Mississippi, but still, if I knew that going in, it would deter good people from getting into office. Absolutely, it would.
Yeah, I did it once as a very, very young man, and it was a failure, but it was not a failure; it was a success in adding to the experience of the job itself. Because I know, just being firsthand, and expending that shoe leather. In two things I've learned, and I've mentioned this before, that small dogs are the ones that'll bite, and the people who are most adamant saying that they're going to vote for you probably won't.
Yeah. those are two tough lessons in politics, and you figured them out quick. Yeah, it's exactly right. It's exactly right.
One of the reasons that this is so frustrating to get Shad White as my guest this morning is that common sense people look at this and say, you cannot take a phrase out of a long speech and indict on that as the meaning of the entire speech. And you've done that over and over and over. They did it about the illegals crossing the border before. Now he had a recent speech where they're doing that again, where he's talking about the blood tainted, all the fentanyl coming across, causing all of this death and destruction. And it was on the news this morning, even on Fox.
Yeah.
They want to, they're comparing him to Hitler because of that. But that's frustrating to many people.
It is, and I'll tell you why it's frustrating to me. If you want to compare President Trump to Mussolini or something and say he's going to govern like that, guess what? He's already been president for 4 years. We know how he's going to govern. He didn't govern as Mussolini. I mean, we had great policies for the 4 years that he was president, so this is not a mystery or something like that. So I feel like it's strange and obsessive for the media to just look at every single line in a speech and try to dissect every subtle meaning in there and draw every historical parallel they can think of. We know how he is going to govern. The other thing that bothers me is the double standard that the media have. I mean, how many times are Republicans going to get asked about this speech, and compare that to how many times Democrats get asked about Hunter Biden's laptop or the millions of dollars of payments from China to Hunter Biden, and who's the big guy in the emails on Hunter Biden's laptop if you followed that story? Or is President Biden mentally fit to be president given some of the stumbles that we've seen? I mean, these are all just questions that the media could be asking Democrats, but for some reason they don't ever ask those questions. They only run up to Republicans and ask them about every single line in a Trump speech, which makes no sense to me. I mean, it does. It's a double standard, and we know why they're doing it. But still, if they wanted to be fair, it makes no sense.
And disinformation is more powerful than ever in our technological age. I'm telling you, you can find the most ardent, the most loyal Trump supporter or Republican, and all of a sudden, after one day of media platforms and news and everything else, they could say something about, and I've seen this and had conversations about it, they can say something about Lindsey Graham, this and that. Now, Lindsey ain't pure, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things you can like or dislike about him, but he's not an alien from another country. Whether he's his sexual perversions or his sexual proclivity, I should say, nobody cares one way or the other. How does he vote and what does he vote on? The other thing is the new Speaker of the House. There are people trying to tear him down. There are people trying to tear down everything one way or the other. There is a full force of people out there. That's their job, whether they're in the Democrat Party or in corporate America and some other places. So you have to just kind of whitewash it all and just make up your own mind. But when you hear 10 things about somebody and 9 of them are nice and one of them's not nice, don't center on the one nice thing. It's just use common sense.
Yep.
We'll talk more about the state auditor's office. A lot of things going on with Shad White. That's coming up. Number one question from a lot of people is, what took it so long in this Hinds County audit deal?
Yeah. Yeah. So we just released Hinds County's audit yesterday. It took us 15 months to do this audit. Typically, a county audit will take us about 7 to 9 months to do. So the question is, what took so long? Well, in order to do an audit, we have to have basic documents from the county describing how their budget looks, how the numbers look. And to be frank with you, we could not get those basic documents in a timely way. I mean, we would have to wait weeks and sometimes months for a request that would take any other county, a few days. This is incredibly frustrating for us. It slows down the process, makes it difficult for the county to go out and get a loan or to go out and get a federal grant, because you can't get a federal grant if you don't have an up-to-date audit. But here's the big concern that I have when I look back at this experience with Hinds County and the fact that it took them so long to get us documents. One of the reasons it took them so long is that they have only 1 or 2 employees who know how to get at the documents that describe how they're spending money. And when you have all that power and all that information in the hands of 1 or 2 employees, it is a giant fraud risk. I'm not saying there's fraud happening in Hinds County, but I'm telling you that based on my knowledge as state auditor, based on all the cases that happen around the country, when you have too much control in the hands of 1 or 2 people, they present a fraud risk. They just do. So this is a really big issue that I think people need to pay attention to, because counties like this have to get their act together. They have to hire competent staff, and they have to handle their books a little bit better, because if they don't, we're going to look up and money's going to be missing one day. That's the risk.
Are there any consequences if they don't meet any deadlines or anything else? Are there any consequences, and even personal consequences to this?
There are no personal consequences, because no money is missing, right? This is just a matter of, are you getting your job done on time? Here are the consequences that usually happen to counties if they can't get their job done on time, or if they can't get their documents together to get audited. Usually the consequence is they'll go to the bank, they'll say, I want to issue a bond, I want to borrow money, and they'll get told no. You can't borrow money if you don't have an up-to-date audit, and so then they can't pay for stuff that they want to pay for. Or they'll go to the federal government and they'll say, all the other counties around me are getting this federal grant to spruce up their sewer system or something like that. Can I get access to that money? And the federal government will tell them, no, you can't, because you don't have an audit. So that's really the most basic and immediate consequence if a county can't get their act together financially. Otherwise, there are very, very few consequences.
Let's look ahead, not that far ahead, because it's almost here, the 2024 legislative session. What's your game plan for that? What do we need to do, and what bills will you be at least asking for in the session? I'm
going to push for at least 4 bills this year. I can walk you through them. I mean, I think one of the most interesting is the whistleblower reward bill. So in federal law right now, if you're a private citizen and you uncovered some corruption in the federal government, you could come forward with that information. And in some situations, if the federal government actually looks at what you say and they recover some money based on your whistleblower tip, you can receive a percentage of what is recovered. Now, that's under federal law. We don't have a provision like that under state law, so I think we ought to. I think we ought to give people a reason to come forward with information about corruption. I think this could be a game changer in our fight against public corruption in the state auditor's office, because it would mean a lot more information coming to our office, give us more cases to investigate, and I think that we would be able to put a greater dent in corruption. So I'm excited about that idea.
Don't leave this one yet. Sure. What's the percentage? Would it be akin to the federal?
Yeah. So the way we've written the draft statute right now is mirroring the federal statute, which is 15%. So legislature, of course, can change this. They can kill this bill. They can pass it. They can do whatever they want to with it, because they get to make the laws and the governor signs them. But that's the way we've drafted the initial legislation.
This is corruption or any whistleblowers on county or city?
County, city, state government.
Or state government.
Yeah, any state or local money would be covered by this whistleblower statute.
And can the person giving this be anonymous, or is that they have to be out in the open?
Well, to us, they would have to be known because we'd have to know where to cut the check.
No, I know that, but to the general public.
Yeah, to the public, I think you could still remain anonymous in the sense that you are still protected by the other whistleblower statutes that say you don't have to be known. Yeah.
Number two,
and I'm excited about this. It'll be controversial, but I think it's incredibly important. I think we need to be smarter about how we're spending money in higher education right now. I mean, we are spending a lot of money on majors that, frankly, they produce graduates that aren't likely to get a job in Mississippi and leave immediately, so we get no return on our investment. But then in addition to that, we're seeing a lot of these programs at Mississippi public universities and around the country that really look like they don't do much other than indoctrinate these kids into some sort of crazy ideology. So the argument I have made is that the legislature ought to set up a committee of experts, economists, workforce experts, people who understand the job needs of our state, and they ought to come up with a mechanism for funding our universities that prioritizes taxpayer money to the degrees that actually matter, that actually produce graduates who can get a job here in Mississippi, and does not prioritize the degree programs that don't produce anything useful at all. That is going to be, I think, one of the more necessary conversations that we have in this state, especially when you look around the country and you see all the craziness happening on college campuses. We really do not want our taxpayer dollars subsidizing the brainwashing of these kids. What we want is our taxpayer dollars going to educate students so that they might have skills and get a career and give back to our society.
Have you isolated those classes that you're talking about? So in other words, if this materializes?
Yeah, so we did an initial look at the data around, okay, what are graduates from each degree program making if they stay in Mississippi? So what's their average salary? And then what percentage of them are actually staying? And so we plotted that out on a chart, and you could read it on the Auditor's Office website. You go to my website right now, osa.ms.gov, and just type in brain drain, and you'll get the two reports that describe this. So we've already done an initial look, but I think it needs a deep dive by a committee of experts to make this, to flesh this out.
I bet you're not getting any pushback on this one at all.
Yeah. Look, the fights that are worth having are often the ones that are most controversial. That's just the truth of life.
Number three
is we really need to strengthen the Open Meetings Act here in Mississippi. If you have, let's say, a local government who goes into a secret meeting and they violate our open meetings laws, they can be found to have violated the law, but if they make a decision in that secret illegal meeting, the decision can still stand, which makes no sense to me at all. That makes no sense at all. So I think we need to strengthen our Open Meetings Act and say, look, if you're a board of supervisors, you go into a secret meeting, you have a meeting that violates the law, and you decide who's going to get the garbage contract, guess what? The garbage contract doesn't stand. You got to come back out. You have to do it in the normal process in front of the public the way it was intended to be done.
It's amazing to me that we don't have that statute.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I discovered
it's crazy.
I discovered this when I was actually a lawyer before I became state auditor. I had a group of citizens from a city over in West Mississippi, and they said, hey, we think that our city council has entered into a garbage contract in a secret meeting that violated the law. We don't have money to hire a lawyer. Will you represent us for free? So I said, yes, I did. I took their case to the Ethics Commission. We won. And then at the end of it, I said, okay, well, what happens to the garbage contract? And the answer was, oh, well, that still stands because there's no provision in the law that says that decision is null and void. So we got to fix that.
All worthy, those three. What about number four?
So number four, this is really interesting and close to my heart. I think we need to do a better job of incentivizing kids to get into the high school military program, JROTC. I'll give you an example. In Jackson Public Schools, they have a great JROTC program. And what we see in that program is you got a lot of kids who come from broken homes many times. And we know that if those kids, if they don't get extra mentorship, if they grow up in a home without a father, for instance, they're 20 times more likely to go to prison, 5 times more likely to be in poverty, 9 times less likely to finish high school. These are catastrophic statistics that you and I end up paying for as taxpayers, especially if they go to prison. So what we're seeing in JROTC is military veterans get paired as mentors with these kids. The veterans almost become like another parent to these kids. And because they have that presence in their lives, that mentorship presence in their lives, these kids' lives are made immeasurably better. JROTC in Jackson Public Schools has a 100% high school graduation rate. That is wild. That is really, really good, especially compared to the general population of Jackson Public Schools. They have a 95% school attendance rate, which is much, much higher than the rest of the Jackson Public School population. They score, on average, about 3 points higher on the ACT than the rest of Jackson Public Schools. So this program is working, and my argument is let's give kids a reason to be in the program. Let's give them an incentive. Let's say something like, if you finish the JROTC high school military program, you get free community college. That will be far cheaper for us as taxpayers to put kids into the program that way than to watch some of them go to prison later on.
Quick break here. Final thoughts from Shad White, State Auditor, right after any arrest or indictments, et cetera.
You know, we're kind of wrapping up our year right now. We'll have a few other cases that may pop between now and the end. But I would want to say something about a conversation that we're having in the state right now. Yesterday or day before, the state economist came out and said there are fewer adults working in Mississippi right now, or a smaller percentage of adults working in Mississippi than any other time, meaning our labor force, the percentage of adults that wake up and go to work every day, is smaller than at any other time in the data that he has seen. So only about 54% of our adults in Mississippi are actually showing up for work every day. This is really a catastrophic statistic. I mean, I think Mississippi has a ton of momentum right now, but if we're going to work on something as a state and make our economy better, this has got to be it. And one of the arguments I have made is, there's another statistic that we're very bad in, and it is the number of kids growing up in single-parent homes. And I think these two things are directly related. I mean, if you look at it, kids that grow up, again, without an engaged father in the home, more likely to go into prison, less likely to be able to get a job, more likely to be in poverty, less likely to finish high school. So I think we have to ask ourselves some tough questions. What are we going to do to help get these kids off on the right foot if they're growing up in broken homes? We know that 20% of Mississippians are in poverty, and a lot of that poverty gets handed down from generation to generation to generation. And if we're going to crack that problem, we've got to start early in a kid's life so that they don't grow up without this permanent advantage of having two parents in the household. So what can we do? You can't force daddies to get into the household. I think what we need to do is we need to start a big conversation in this state around telling kids that they need to finish high school, get a job or go to college, and get married before they have babies. In that order. They need to do those things before they have babies. If you haven't followed the research, that's called the success sequence. And in 2009, there were a group of researchers who discovered this statistic. And since then, you're looking around the country and you're seeing some schools actually put into place curricula that teach kids that this is the pathway to success. There's a charter school in the Bronx in New York that's actually teaching kids on a day-to-day basis, you have to finish high school, get a job or go to college, and get married before you have kids, or you are doomed to failure. If we really want to get at these big problems in Mississippi, like poverty, like too many of our adults sitting on the couch and not going to work every day, we've got to start doing stuff like this.
You got to have some help on the other side, though, from the moms and dads out there and from the population on all factors.
I agree.
Whether it's white or black or brown, doesn't matter. You have to have some help out there.
But you can't. You can't go out and you can't put a gun to mamas and daddies' heads and say, "Get in there."
Well, specifically on this one, on that survey not that survey, but on that speech by the economists. I just asked the question, as many people have. We lost 42,000 people after the pandemic that didn't come back to work in Mississippi. We are on the bottom. We have less people. Forgive me, because I want to talk about this coming up at 8:30, and I'll use the pulling the wagon Phil Graham. We have 42,000 people out there decided not to get in the front of the wagon to help us pull, but decided to ride the wagon.
That's right.
Now, how many of those want to be on expanded Medicaid?
Yep, that's right.
How many people are out there that could work? And I'm not talking about the people who can't work, who have no money to raise their children. They've got to stay home one way or the other. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who could work, but they do not want to work, and they found a little niche to survive.
Right. So let me throw this
with everybody else working.
Let me throw this at you. I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head. There's this other problem of adults just getting out of the workforce, and they're sitting on the couch because they can. What we need to do is we need to stop obsessing over paying people to not work and putting into place programs that do that. And instead, we need to really think hard about programs that encourage people to work. I'll give you an example. 26 other states have a tax credit for people who go from being unemployed to employed. The only way you get it is if you get off the couch and you go get a job.
Yep.
And in fact, this tax cut, what it does is as you stay at your job and you make more and more money, the tax cut actually goes up. So it incentivizes you to work harder at your job, make more money, move your way up. And then, of course, the tax cut levels off and it goes away. This is one of the most proven programs to get people back into the workforce that we have. It's a good old-fashioned tax cut. We could do that in Mississippi. We actually get money from the federal government to do this, but we are choosing not to do it right now. It's called the Earned Income Tax Credit. So these are the kinds of ideas that we need to be talking about. I think not how do we expand welfare programs. That's the real question.
It is. I think 24 is going to be a great year for we're poised to do that as far as economically. There are a lot of things happening out there. There are a lot of people across the country who want to get the heck out of New York and California and Illinois, and they want to come south. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. But we have to find a way to decrease the level of poverty in this state. It's killing us.
And look, you're not going to do that unless you start out early in a kid's life. That's my argument.
Yes,
you have to start out early.
Generational. We've got to do both generational and something that's we can do now in the next 4 or 5 years. And I understand what you're talking about, but there's two different plans of attack on this one.
Agreed.
Always love talking to you, sir.
Thanks,
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
And the kids are getting older, so the Christmases are getting a little bit more energetic, are they not?
I've got 3 at home. We're going to have 6 kids under the age of 5 in my house over Christmas. So if you want to borrow one, I'll send one your way.
I'll see you in a couple of months and more gray hair. Back with more coming up next.